So, what happens when simply sharing a post online lands you in prison for nearly 2 years? We're about to dive into a case that isn't just about one man. No, this story challenges our fundamental understanding of what law even is and how that definition can become a matter of life and liberty. That right there, that's the voice of Dr. Chen Jingyuan, a PhD, writing from a prison cell. He was convicted of a serious crime for doing something that, let's be honest, millions of us do every single day. His story really forces us to step back and ask some tough questions about justice, about power, and what the law is actually for. Okay, to really get our heads around this, here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll just cover the basic facts of the case and the official verdict. Then, and this is the interesting part, we're going to look at it through three completely different philosophical lenses. Each one is going to show us a totally different truth about the nature of law itself. All right, so first things first. Let's get the facts straight. What exactly did Dr. Chen do that ended with him sitting in a prison cell? The timeline here is pretty stark. For about 3 years, Dr. Chen was forwarding posts online. We're talking stuff that included content from the U.S. Embassy's official account. Then, bam, September 2022, police show up at his home and arrest him. He gets hit with this charge for picking quarrels and provoking trouble, which is a notoriously vague law. Sentenced to 20 months, and his appeal? It gets rejected without him even getting another day in court. Now, this is where it gets really fascinating. You've got this massive gap, this huge canyon, between the court's reasoning for the verdict and what the defendant says was actually happening. Let's look at these two totally conflicting realities side by side. Okay, so on one hand, the court painted this picture of a malicious act. They said, look, this guy has a high education, he should know right from wrong. They claimed he spread false information that was an insult to the political system and caused serious public disorder. But the defense? They told a completely different story. They said, hold on, these posts were opinions. Some were even art. They argued there was no intent to cause trouble. He was just doing one-click forwards to save things for his research. And here's the kicker, his account had fewer than 100 followers. So you have to ask, how could that possibly cause serious public disorder? This is the heart of the whole conflict. So how do we even begin to make sense of this? Well, let's try on our first lens. This one views law not just as a bunch of rules on paper, but as a system that absolutely must be based on moral principles. This idea is often called law as integrity, and it was famously championed by the philosopher Ronald Dworkin. His whole point was that law isn't just about mechanically following rules. It's about moral reasoning. A judge's job, in his view, is to find the single best moral interpretation of the law. And critically, individual rights, like freedom of speech, act as trumps. They're like a trump card that beats the government's interests, even when the state claims it's acting for the public good. And when you apply this lens, the whole case just snaps into a different kind of focus. Dr. Chen's fundamental right to expression was basically thrown out for this fuzzy idea of public order. That violates the whole rights as Trump's idea. The verdict also went against basic principles like freedom of speech and the presumption of innocence, which shatters the law's integrity. And the judge, instead of being this heroic moral reasoner Dworkin called the Hercules judge, they pretty much just acted like a bureaucrat executing an order, just stamping a piece of paper. So from this perspective, the takeaway isn't just that the judge made the wrong call. It's much deeper. It's that when a legal system turns out a result that is so completely disconnected from moral principles and individual rights, that decision, well, it becomes philosophically illegitimate. It just stops being an instrument of justice at all. Okay, let's switch gears. Take off the morality glasses for a second and put on a different pair. Let's look at the law as a practical tool, almost like social engineering. We have to ask a very simple question. Did this outcome even make sense from a practical, real-world standpoint? Right, so this school of thought basically says we should judge a law by its results. Does it actually work? Is it efficient? Does it do a good job of balancing all the competing interests in society to get the best possible outcome with the least amount of waste and friction? It's all about the costs and the benefits. So let's do the math on this case. The benefit? The court said they were protecting public order, an order that was never actually disturbed. So the benefit, it's pretty much zero. Now, let's look at the costs. Oh, the costs were immense. You've got the cost of the police, the courts, the prison system. You've got the loss of a scholar's contribution to society. That's a huge loss of human capital. And then you have this massive, invisible cost, the chilling effect this has on free speech for everyone else. So the verdict?
It was a massively inefficient decision that paid enormous, real costs for a completely imaginary benefit.
It reminds me of what the great legal thinker Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. once said. The life of the law has not been logic, it has been experience. And from this practical point of view, a legal decision that completely ignores real-world experience and produces such a lopsided negative result has totally failed in its purpose as a useful social tool.
All right, our final lens. This one asks the most cynical, but, maybe the most direct question of all. What if the law isn't about morality or efficiency? What if, at the end of the day, it's just about power?
This perspective comes from critical legal theory, and it basically tells us to stop listening to what the law says it's doing and start paying attention to what it's actually doing and who it's doing it for. This theory argues that law isn't neutral, it's a tool, and it's used by the powerful to keep things the way they are. Vague laws, what some call pocket crimes, are perfect for this, because you can pull them out and use them against pretty much anyone you want, whenever you want.
When you look at the case through this lens, suddenly the verdict doesn't look like a mistake at all. It looks like the system working perfectly. The charge itself, picking quarrels and provoking trouble, is a classic pocket crime. It's so vague it can mean anything. The enforcement was obviously selective. Why him and not the thousands of others who share similar things? And the verdict itself was dripping with political language, punishing insults to the political system. This wasn't really a legal process, it was an ideological one.
So the crucial point here is that this verdict wasn't a failure of the law. It was a successful exercise of power, just dressed up in legal robes. It was using the language and ceremony of justice as a fig leaf to hide what was really going on. Okay, so we've just looked at the exact same set of facts through 3 completely different lenses, and each one has shown us a radically different picture. Let's just quickly recap what we've seen. So what was this verdict? Was it a moral failure? A moment where the law betrayed its highest calling to protect rights? Was it just a horribly inefficient outcome, a colossal waste of society's resources for no good reason? Or was it an exercise of power, with the law working exactly as it was designed to, as a tool for control? Which one you believe really depends on the lens you're using, on what you think law is supposed to be in the first place. This case doesn't really hand us a nice, tidy answer. What it does, though, is give us a framework. It shows us that to really understand any legal fight, we have to start by asking a much bigger question. What do we believe the law is for? Because if law can be a moral code, a practical tool, and a weapon of power all at the same time, well, that leaves us with the biggest question of all. What is justice really?